During a high school class project, my teacher told me it's unrealistic being a CEO. It's been my dream to be a CEO since I was 10. So I told her, it is realistic. Follow me on my journey to learn what it takes to become a CEO. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. Today I'm here with Phil. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I just want to thank you again for coming on. I talked to you earlier, but this is my first podcast that I got through a LinkedIn connection. So thank you for being able to have this amazing moment for me in this episode. So thank you.
My pleasure. I think you're doing something great and necessary. I love how you're approaching it and your energy. And I love that you're doing it with your dad. As a father, it's also something I'm exploring with my own son. So that's great.
I definitely will let him know that you said that because we get that a lot, and he anytime somebody says that, he always has like a big smile and he gets cheered up. So I'm gonna share that with him as well. For the first question that I want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. So I'm currently the CEO of the Courage Compass company. It's a company that aims to challenge a little bit of the entrepreneurial culture that we have right now and flip the narrative because often people, when they approach entrepreneurship, they are drawn into operation right away and tactics. And lots of people are really pushing the shiny object syndrome. But then when they actually rub it against reality and step into the real world, then they fall into the internal mismanagement, which creates a pressure and it leads to ultimately self-sabotage through bad decisions. And so my company is building a new framework on how to approach entrepreneurship that is aiming to strengthen the founders from within so that it doesn't crumble. With build founders, the world doesn't break, is our slogan.
So, can you tell us a little about your journey to how you got to where you are today?
Yes. And so I stumbled into entrepreneurship. I originally wanted to be a high school teacher. And then because I was poor, that got me into sales, and sales I discovered I was good at. And so I started to have money, invest in real estate, eventually decided to focus my energy in that career or hire with big companies in different industry, pharmaceutical industry, medical, even the beer industry for a couple of years. And then I felt a calling towards being my own boss, to be an entrepreneur, to go into the unknown and step further outside my comfort zone. And so I began, like I told you before we started this podcast, as a solopreneur, thinking I could offload all of the operation to a remote worker on Upwork and live the 4-hour work week mindset. I didn't want to do less work. I thought I could offload my way into focusing on what I wanted to do, but then it was too complex for me to do it alone, even though I'd been working in business for about 8 years at this point. So I partnered with friends. We began to act as a purchasing department for local health centers in my region, and it was going really well. We were making a couple hundred grand a year. It was growing, but when COVID hit, we were stuck because we couldn't order more than the average of the past 12 months. So every new customer we had onboarded in the last 4 to 6 months, we had to cut because it was over the means line. And I decided in a nutshell to pivot my business model, became a medical nitrile glove importer, and was able to negotiate my way into scaling $70 million of revenue in 8 months. And so that really brought me into, I guess, the national world of business. And so I got Sacramento County as one of my customer, helped pro big purchasing groups in Canada, did a lot of business with the Quebec government, expanding in Africa, Mexico, Thailand. And so for the last 5 to 6 years, I've been a serial entrepreneur building and investing in multiple venture before stopping and actually building the company I'm now leading.
So, when you first started and you got into this industry, was this something that you knew that you were super passionate about, or was it more, I just want to give it a try and see if I where it takes me?
I felt like I was always chasing identity. That was one thing that made me stood out is I wanted to go outside my comfort zone to see myself as clearly as I can and become the kind of person that had strength for two was how I'm framing it now. Being young and poor, like I said, I had to take care of my brother, my sister, my family, working young, being parentified a little bit, not in a mean way, but just out of necessity. And so I always had that will to protect people, and financially was one of the ways to accomplish that. And so, as I was having a lot of success as a business development territory manager in the pharmaceutical space, but then realizing I was bored after a year or two, I get into the unknown, I figure it out, I outcompete. And then when I hit that little plateau space where it's more being a farmer and nurturing the success you've had, I'm just bored out of my mind. So I want to get out. And so I figured that might be an entrepreneurial trait. And so that was the core motivation. It's to discover if I had the entrepreneurial trait before it was cool to be an entrepreneur. I just thought maybe that was my path because I'm a creative guy and all of that. And so I really just stumbled into discovering what entrepreneurship is by following who I thought the whispers of who I could be, basically.
You talked about how you just always had that entrepreneurial spirit when you realized you got bored after you figure out how to make the systems work. So what is it about that where it's like you just gotta go chase the next thing?
Yeah. So for me, entrepreneurship is a hero journey. And so
Mhm.
what a hero journey is, if you look at Joseph Campbell, so now this is a bit more philosophical. Joseph Campbell, in a nutshell, he discovered by after looking at all the stories in the world that you have an archetypical story, which is like the same kind of building block of a story in between all the story. And that's what inspired Star Wars. So he discovered that you receive the call to adventure. Then you go in the forest, but not on somebody else's trail. You go into the unknown. You carve your path. Then you meet people that help you, people that want to destroy you. You reach a bottom moment where you have to transform, fight your dragon, collect the treasure, but it doesn't end there. It ends when you get what he calls the elixir of wisdom, which is the truth that you discovered along the journey, and you come back wiser to share it. And so that's in a nutshell, the loop of the hero journey. And if you think about entrepreneurship, that's also the case. It's very different than business. If you want to be, because you could be a CEO in an established business, that's business. It's system optimization. It is hard, it's complex, and when you're in a leadership position where you have actually power, there are there is a common path between leadership and entrepreneurship. But if you really create something from scratch, it has an element of creativity, but also personal discovery that requires you to be in tune with your intuition. You can limit your mistakes by surrounding yourself with a governing board, but ultimately it's your story. So you have to really carry your decision to the failure point if you have to, so that you can actually collect that elixir, learn from it, and then go back into the unknown and start another venture. And if you look at the stats, 98% of first time founders actually fail. And so it means that if you, on a positive side, if you look at every business out there, it exists because someone failed and tried again. It's the normal current path of entrepreneurship. Now, what I want to challenge there is it doesn't have to be a path of suffering. It doesn't have to be the case that there's 5 times more depression and anxiety amongst founders. It can be something we approach with more clarity. And so when we reach that failure zone, we don't experience a destructive failure that rips apart of who we are and our concept of who we are through the failure, but it puts it in perspective. This is part of the game. An entrepreneur lives on the lining of a coin, trying to bridge two realities, the one he thinks can happen and the one that it currently is. So you're always outside your comfort zone. No matter how much skills you have, you're always going to be outside your comfort zone, bridging these two, like you're holding a rope. And then you never know when the universe is going to flip away your dreams, right? And they can flip it in a way that you receive luck and you become successful by luck, or it can be the reverse and you become unlucky. And I've got the both. And I've done a $70 million scale up by adapting to a pandemic. And then I lost 5 million on a scam. I almost went bankrupt when a $300 million contract crumbled. And then I lost technical partners at the finish line after finding product market fit with my technology company because they burnt out. I had a warehouse fire, losing 500,000 boxes of gloves. And so these are, some of them were under my control, some of them weren't. And how I navigated every decision along the way by not being emotionally reactive, by understanding my patterns, these are the real gift that stayed with me along after across all these entrepreneurial journey. And this is why you have more chances to be successful as you go. But you have to look for these nuggets of wisdom. Otherwise, you fail as the puppet of somebody else's ideas.
So I liked how you shared your wins and your losses because what I realize a lot of times people don't share the hard moments of when you have to bounce back from failures, but only share the times where they make the 70 million in 8 months. But before you made the 70 million in 8 months, how were you able to make 100K? You're making six figures like per month, you said?
No,
Like
no,
six
no.
figures a
We
year.
were making, I think, I'm not sure about the math. It's between 100 and $300,000 of revenue. The business was a year and a half old when it basically failed and we had to pivot it. So it was
Wow.
still early. The way it happened, okay, I'm trying to remember the date. So the COVID pandemic happened around 2020 March. I think the business started summer of 2018. That's when they started it. And they came to me and said, "Hey, Phil, we need a business development guy." So I, it was so the people in my team was a physician, physical therapist, and an accountant, and later on a management guy. And so they tested the idea that so one of the elderly center that the physician was giving care at were getting ripped off. They were not, nobody was in charge of purchasing, so they were paying 50% more. And so by giving it to our accountant,
Mhm.
streamlining purchases, they saved at 50%. We kept like a third of it to pay yourself, right? And so there was a little model here that they was wondering, could we replicate that and have a product market fit? And so that was my job. And so that's what I did. And that's how we came from 3,000 to a couple 100,000 in a year or so. But it was part-time, right? We weren't, nobody had put any money. It was really just a part-time endeavor that we could afford to do with the means we had and the skills we had. So I would say that to your question, one of the important things to understand when you step into creating a business is the growth stages of a business. So you have the first stage, which is ideation, which is you think about something. And then you need to reach the next stage, which is the seed stage, where you have a prototype that goes into market and validates that there's a fit between your solution and the market needs. So you can identify one customer with one solution, and then it's a matter of scaling that one customer and one solution into the growth phase, which is the third phase. And so at that point, there you have something that works. You can get funding for that thing because it's de-risk. So you open up a broader range of investors. And your challenge is to switch from the lone wolf to the CEO. And so the hustler to the CEO, however you want to frame that, because now you have to build a team and you have to lead that team and you have to have a systems based approach. And if you succeed to do that, then you're going to build a company. So you're going to enter the small, medium business realm. And the next season is more of a business management season that works until you reach a point where you have product misalignment or you need an expansion. Then this becomes another entrepreneurial season where you step again into the unknown. You try to explore, do I pivot my model? Do I adapt it? Do I go into this market? And so there's another layer of risky element. So it's no longer around systems optimization. It's more around entrepreneurial courage again. And then the last season would be the exit season, where you finally exit that and you reach a different type of crossroad. So there's a failure crossroad, and then there's a you can fail it. There's a crossroad in the shadows and in the light is the way I frame it. So when I exited my company, I failed to successfully navigate that crossroad. And what I mean by that, so this is so it's a more complex. So if I talk too much, stop me, okay?
You're
But
good. I'm learning. I'm learning.
all right. So that crossroad in the light is when you reach a point where you sold your business, or even this, it's the same kind of crossroad when you move from the seed to the growth stage where you have to become a leader. It's a transformation crossroad. And for me, because I had a founder conflict that was very much taking a big toll on me, I had a imposter syndrome, a self-worth issue. And instead of saying, okay, I just made an 8-figure exit, I should probably become an investor, or I can start maybe doing my social impact endeavors that I wanted to do, or go back to being a teacher like I wanted. Things like that. I decided to that I still needed another exit. I still needed something else to happen along the same growth path to prove to myself that I was enough. And so I failed to cross that crossroad of transformation. So there's a point where growth becomes your enemy because it anchors you into an impossible narrative of self-worth. So there's a point where you don't need to grow anymore to feel worthy. You have to transform, and it's still a form of growth, but it has different rules. You don't evaluate the quality of a CEO the same way you would evaluate, let's say, a sales guy. So if you're a sales guy, you become the CEO. You're the guy that reached product market fit. Now you have to build a team. You cannot monitor your success about around the same rules. It's not about how much money you bring to the company anymore. It's around how much you optimize your system, how aligned your employees are with their role and the mission and all of that. So it's still growth, but it's a transformative growth. And so that's what I mean by the crossroad is, are you still anchored in your same metrics, or are you able to discover new metrics and actually learn from what happened before and become something else? So that happens when you fail, and that happens when you reach a different growth stage, and it happens also when you exit, which is a form of growth stage. I'll pause there.
So I liked how you broke down different seasons and what happens in each season. How do you know when it's time for a new season?
There's a technical and then there's an intuitive answer for that. I think when you lead your own journey of entrepreneurship, you have to be in tune with your intuition and decide, okay, is this time for a new chapter for me? Is it time to sell my business? Because it's a personal decision to sell your business. It's a personal decision to transformation is an intuitive action. But then there are also objective metrics that you need to look for when, especially if you go from, okay, am I even really at the seed stage right now? The question is, how do you evaluate a product market fit?
Mm-hmm.
How many customers do you need? How many design partners do you need to reach that point? And so that's something ChatGPT and all the other AI can help you do. But then to really make the decision after that, you have to go back to your intuition to decide if that knowledge is true or is it a distraction. And so often people will rush too much. They will think they have product market fit too fast,
Mm-hmm.
and they will try to scale something that doesn't have a strong foundation. So as a rule, I would say be more patient and really make sure you do have product market fit. You understand your sales process, how you convert attention to customer. You understand how to retain your customer. You understand your metrics. And then once you have that nailed down, then you can map out a different strategic plan for the growth stage.
So can you t talk to us and explain how you were able to pivot and make 70 million in 8 months?
Yeah, so that was a crazy story, but so like I said, we couldn't order anymore. We had to cut a customer base. And at that point, it was just me and the accountant in the team actually doing any work. And we were tired about that. Yeah, we had a commissions agreement and everything else that we would have received in the future, but it was really a lot of grinding for equal shares and all of that. So there was already an underlining narrative of let's just stop that and do something else together. Are we really going to wait until COVID ends, being in the red and cutting all the hard work we have already done? But then I felt while everybody else were looking at mask, there was something with gloves. And I didn't have any money to take a risk, any significant money, but I explored that feeling. And so it wasn't really anything overly obvious, like an analytical thinker would say, oh, the number clearly say you should do that. No, it was more of a, okay, there's something there. Let me dig. So I had conversation. So I step into a relational quadrant of thinking to gather more data. I looked at logically how easy it is to copy a mask versus gloves, which is a chemical product. And I understood that if the pandemic dragged on, the supply chain disruption was way worse than just mask. Yes, there's a surge in demand for mask, but there's also a surge in offer for mask. rather than gloves, if we it's not going to be met anytime soon. So I discovered a guy on Alibaba selling
Mm.
router, and he said that he knew someone with gloves in a warehouse. And I took a leap of faith out of the fact that one of my friends said, "Hey, I used to buy from China, and the government there is so strict that I would trust him. He doesn't want to fraud you because he's going to be in so much trouble." And so I gave him all my life savings, which was like a couple thousand, maybe 20 grand. I just had bought a house. I had my third kid on the way. And I maxed out my credit line to put a deposit on a $450,000 purchase that I thought I could potentially sell to the government because I had preliminary discussion with them. Eventually closed my first deal to the government of Quebec, negotiated a full upfront payment, and then that allowed me to pay in full and then start the loop of being invited as a trusted supplier to invitation only tenders and eventually expand outside of it, always maximizing. So it was because it was a crazy, always changing period of time. It was very much intuition based, but it was the same for my other pivot. So when I sold that business, I invested in Prometheum. It's a nanotechnology company that has a technology to purify the air using visible light.
Mm.
So it's a green initiative. It is potentially very great for the planet. And so I always wanted to have a social impact company that was always on, I was put in the medical space, but my goal was to have something that has a positive impact always. That's always something I'm looking for. And so that felt like it. It felt like a natural transition from medical supplies to air purification because of the pandemic, the contacts I had. So I went there, but I realized that the market wasn't ready to approach a better technology because they had been so crap for all COVID. And so they didn't want to hear about something else. They were waiting for the engineers and the government to update the standards. And so because of that, we couldn't get product market fit. And so I had to pivot the business. And the way I've done it is I, again, reconnected to my intuition and explored aimlessly. So there's an element of aimlessness that we have to be comfortable with. Just taking a step with your eyes closed, reconnecting to courage versus hope. And I discovered, I thought, what's the unique value proposition that we really have here? Yes, we have all of these features. We can activate with visible light versus UVC. We're 80 times more efficient, all of that. And this is cool to sell the machine, but if you want to pivot, then you have to dig, you have to deconstruct, and everything is up for grabs at this point. And what works for us is I decided to focus on the capacity to eliminate gaseous pollutant, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and focus on that. And that led to a product market fit. We got letters of intent for hundreds of millions of dollars. Design partners were knocking at the door, early adopters, innovators as well. And just to be more clear, because we were really good at eliminating these gaseous pollutant, it opened up a new possible strategic lane where I started to think, okay, which industry niche has the most problem with volatile organic compounds, VOCs? We discovered maybe 45, let's say, I don't remember. Out of these 45s, how big are they as a potential, and how big is the problem? How urgent is the problem? Are they always spending money to solve that problem? And we narrowed it down to a couple industries. We started to do an outreach, cold calling, just reaching out. And then that's how we got our design partners. That's how we got our letter of intent. And because all the rules were disregarded, then we could envision the idea of not being an air purification machine, but rather a component, a custom job. And so the how we deliver what we do good and uniquely was open for a creative decision. So that's how we pivot. And it's a complex thing that I'm trying to summarize. Oh, I gotta, but yeah.
So for you, I really liked how you talked about going from an entrepreneur to a CEO. How were you able to make that transition? And what was a characteristic that you had to unlearn the leadership role?
I think at first I didn't make it really well. And so what I've done is I anchored myself in a role that I could still just do what I'm best at.
Mm.
And it took me a while to really transform. I think I was a slow learner on that front. But now, what really works for me is approaching building my team through their cognitive preferences. So we all have a cognitive style, and there are tests out there that can help you uncover that. But then at some point, before I took that test, I was like, why can I make any decision easily? Why is it hard for me to make a decision? And then I realized that I have a trimodal divergent brain, which means that there's four quadrants of cognitive preferences. There's the conceptual quadrant, relational, analytical or logical, and then the structural. I have three strengths and one huge weakness on structural. But I'm very strong conceptually, relationally, and logically. And so when I approach the decision, I'm always, what are the million different ways I can make that happen in the next 5 years? Okay, let's go and try to get a partnership to offload my ownership of the responsibility of making it happen, or to be a catalyst, or to get another opinion, or whatever. And then, okay, there's doubt. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and think about a million other ways. And if I'm lucky, then I had my logic cut through. But that was a lot of time wasted just going back and forth and not being able to understand that I had actually three people on my brain governing board trying to argue for the right to decide. But now that I understand that, I can create a space and go to the quadrant I need to go. And as a leader, that's the kind of tool that helped me transform, because I could step outside of the stimulus response basis that I would normally go to. I could see that because I have this weakness in structural, I need to have a CEO type. I need to have a CFO type. I need to have a project manager, a business manager that will take over naturally that side of the responsibility in the business. And so if you build your whole business like that, then you become a CEO of an aligned team. Everybody works in unison. You don't have to argue against their will to do a task that is not in accordance with their cognitive preference, which we will always fight our way out of it because it drains our energy when you're outside your cognitive preference. And there was something else I wanted to say. That was a big shift for me. I'll think about the other one. I'll circle back.
What was your big idea that you had with your businesses that you really wanted to go after and allowed you to go through the hard times of like maybe when you wanted to give up or quit?
Yes, that's a really good question. And that goes back to the fact that we self-sabotage when the internal pressure is too much, right? Oh, yeah. The idea I wanted to say is about self-worth, because often when you transform, if you don't change how you approach your self-worth, then you're not going to feel worthy by adopting different metrics. That's another area that I had to dig into. And so around the internal pressure, I think you need to start with an internal alignment around who you want to become. Why is it important? Why is entrepreneurship a vehicle for you to become this? And then instead of going straight to how, you stay in the what space. And for example, when I created my Courage Compass company, I knew I had learned a lot from my failures, and I had a framework and I had a mission that I wanted to communicate. I was ready to step into a thought leader role, which is a different transform role from what I was before, which is more strategic business development, growth, international, all of that stuff. And so as I approached my new role with the different rules that I had set for myself, it's about the internal pressure, navigating it. Let me go back. That's action. And so when you're clear on the who, why, what, that was what I was explaining. So even when I launched my Courage Compass company, I knew I had these frameworks. I knew I wanted to bring something else to the business world and step into my new role as a thought leader. But then I stepped too fast on the how. And so it's okay, I have these frameworks. I should create a podcast, or I should create a digital platform, or maybe I should be a coach, or and then you try to project yourself in the future to see, is this a scalable path? And then you doubt yourself and you're like, okay, maybe not, maybe. And the real issue was that before thinking about how, you need to solidify the what, and that's a monument. And so that brings you stable ground amidst the quicksand. And that gives you internal strength. Because for me, I have my shadow of entrepreneurship concept. I have my courage compass tools. I have the whispers of transformation. These are monuments of my business core concept that will not change with time. And so if that is the case and I'm not touching them unless I need a pivot, then I can think about the how layer with more flexibility. And the how layer needs to be resource constraint. Do I actually have money? Okay, I'm going to put a couple 100,000 in this business. What can I afford with that money? You could afford to build a team and do workshops. Okay, you could afford, and then you can start strategizing on the how and adapt the how and pivot the how way faster than if you mix the two of them together. If
Mhm.
you decide to be, oh, I am a speaker and I sell book or whatever, but then that's mixing probably the how and the what at some point. If you say I am someone that teaches, then it can be a speaker, a book writer, a podcast host. It can be a bunch of different how. And so that makes it way more flexible. And so the more you advance in clarity and solidify pieces of your business like that, then it just makes you way more resilient. And the second aspect of internal resilience is a good time to talk about one of my monument, which is the shadow of entrepreneurship. So I think when you step into a business realm and you have that internal clarity of who, why, and what, then you have a much more solid ground to help you navigate the inevitable storms. And they come in the form of a shadow. So imagine you're in a boat. You set your entrepreneurial adventure on a boat, on a river, or most like in the ocean. You can see the black clouds coming over your head if you know what to look for. If you don't have the vocabulary and the awareness to understand the state you're in, then the storm is going to be much worse. And the storm of entrepreneurship, the shadow of entrepreneurship is the uncertainty feeling, the fear, and the unworthiness feeling or imposter syndrome. So you're always going to be visited by these three emotions along your journey because you have an idea, you have a plan, you
Mhm.
rub it against reality, you become uncertain. If you don't navigate uncertainty, it can drag you into a fear of failure zone where you start making short-term decision, reactive decision, emotionally driven decision, and then that can lead you into a failure zone, which could also spark a feeling of unworthiness. Why did I even think I could be a realistic CEO? That kind of self-doubt. Everybody's going to give you plenty of that. You don't need yourself to add fire on the fuel on the fire. And that brings you to the failure crossroad. That you, if you fail, then the failure is going to be a destructive one that destroys also your identity as a founder, because everything becomes blended into one thing. It shouldn't be the case. And awareness of the shadow, learning to navigate the shadow and learn from the shadow to see it coming, see it as a signal, and then focusing on the signal, not the noise, is a very important way to be more resilient. And what I'm doing is building a tool called the Entrepreneur Readiness Core. And that looks really much into that internal strength. It's emotional mastery, decision mastery, intuition mastery, and performance mastery from a strategic layer of thinking. We don't go into operation. And so what I just explained is a big chunk of the emotional mastery. But in the decision mastery, you should also know about your cognitive preferences, about the biases that influence your decision. Like, for example, a reciprocity bias is a very well-known one where you are giving something and you tend to disproportionately give back, and that can be manipulated. And so when you are aware of all of these mechanisms of thinking and your natural tendencies and your emotional reactive state, then you start making better decision. And as you turn that into intuition, then you become a very powerful CEO and leader.
I think it's funny how you just broke that down because a couple hours ago I was just talking to my dad and told him I said we were breaking stuff down. Yeah, I feel like an imposter right now, but then he was, it's not that you are, it's that I wasn't allowing myself to see the things that I've done in the past year. And so I really like that you just broke that down. It really helped me understand that that everybody ha it happens to everybody. So
Everybody. Yeah.
yeah.
Even my chief transformation officer, she worked with top people in the military.
Mhm.
Even she told me, I won't say names or anything, but people don't believe, they don't understand how they got there often. It's like, oh shit, why me? Why am I here? So it's not, I think it's part of the game because we're outside our comfort zone as an entrepreneur. And so you're always going to be visited by these feelings. I was able to mostly fix that, but it's still part of me. It's still something like I was asked to help someone this morning and I wasn't sure I could. I was like, can I really do that? Isn't that something? What are the proof that I can do that? And then there's a healthy side of that, but there's a very unhealthy side of that as well. And so if you catch yourself thinking, after I've done this, then I'll be worthy. That's an unhealthy approach to humility and all of these things because you have to realize that what you do doesn't have to, must not impact your worth. Otherwise, and if you go through the logic of that, let's say you wake up someday, how long do you have to wait before you do something that you actually feel worthy of being alive this day? It doesn't make sense. You wake up worthy, you are doing an entrepreneurial hero journey, so you're always going to be outside your comfort zone. It's normal that you don't figure everything else. And when you're in a chaotic creative space, it shakes your foundation of confidence. It's a normal season, it's a normal sprint to go through. And as you go through that phase, then you look back and okay, now I'm wiser, I'm better, and it's clear now, and so I can regain a bit of my confidence. And so confidence is always going to be back and forth like that, but having that perspective helps. Mm,
I just have a couple more questions for you.
sure.
So, in my book, Realistic CEO Tony, he talks about the LBW, the
Yeah.
long, lonely, born work. So, can you tell us about the LBW in your career?
Yeah. So I'll use the lens of cognitive preference. I'm very creative. That feeds and energizes me. But my weakness is structural. So it's the long, boring work. So I am naturally not good at that. And that has been a liability that I've compensated by partnership at first. But then there's also the fact that it became a decision-making liability as well, because if you are afraid to step into the structural, long, boring work side of things, you're gonna give yourself all the reasons to stay into you what feels courageous, but is really just your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And so now when I see myself thinking about changing my strategy or my path, I pause and I really ask myself, is this me going into my creative conceptual quadrant out of comfort because I'm feeling a shadow moment right now? Or do I really need to think more? And often the answer is no, just go into your structural quadrant and get it done so that you actually have momentum. Because that's the power of the long, boring work is you create new data, you create momentum, and then you can go back to some of your strength if that wasn't your strength when the time is, and that harmony of energy, it really makes a difference.
That was great. So, the last question is just what's one fun fact about yourself that nobody really knows?
Fun fact about myself. I don't know how fun it is. I can say I'm a big comedy fan. I really like, lately, I've been listening to Tom Segura, Your Mom's House podcast. I like that show. I really like a lot of the comedian world. I really enjoy a lot. I'm a big mixology fan as well. I like old-fashioned cocktails, playing with that. I have Irish pubs in Thailand that I co-own with partners. So I like to invest in fun things like that. And yeah, traveling and things like that.
Th- Thank you. I really do want to thank you again for coming on. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on to my podcast. So thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and keep doing the great things you're doing. It's necessary, and it's an interest of mine to help nurture the entrepreneurial spirit of the next generation. Because I think with AI, knowledge is going to be out there, but navigating and having the courage to step into these identity roles as a CEO and things like that's what is ultimately going to make the biggest difference. And if kids are blinded by the possibility of their potential, like you're pointing out in your book, then we're robbing humanity from a potential of their potential, and we need that. We need to reconnect with the productivity of how we can be productive as human, and that comes from a sense of possibility. And so I think your mission is very important.
Thank you. And I want to thank every single one of you for all the support that you have shown in this past year of my journey in becoming the realistic CEO. So ways that you can support even more is by going onto my website, www.realisticceo.com, and ordering your copy of the Realistic CEO book. And if you want to support even more, you can also donate. Same website, www.realisticCEO/donate. So thank you again for all support. I truly appreciate it. See you in the next one. Peace.